Chapter 8. And the men of Ephraim said unto him, Why hast you served us thus, that you didst not call us when you wentest to fight the Midian? And they did chide with him sharply. And he said unto them, What have I now done in comparison with you? Is not the gleaning of Ephraim better than the vintage of Abiezer? God hath delivered into your hand the princes of Midian, Oreb and Zeb, and what was I able to do in comparison with you? Then their anger was abated toward him when he had said that. And Gideon came to the Jordan, and passed over, he and the 300 men that were with him, faint, yet pursuing. And he said unto the men of Succoth, Give, I pray you, loaves of bread unto the people that follow me, for they are faint, and I am pursuing after Zebah and Zalmunna, the kings of Midian. And the princes of Succoth said, Are the hands of Zebah and Zalmunna now in your power, that we should give bread unto your army? And Gideon said, Therefore, when the Lord hath delivered Zebah and Zalmunna into my hand, then will I tear your flesh with the thorns of the wilderness and with the briars. And he went up thence to Penuel, and spoke unto them in like manner. And the men of Penuel answered him as the men of Succoth had answered. And he spoke also unto the men of Penuel, saying, When I come back in peace, I will break down this tower. Now Zebah and Zalmunna were in Karkor, and their host with them, about 15,000 men, all that were left of all the host of the children of the east. For there fell of 120,000 men that drew the sword. And Gideon went up by the way of them that dwelt in tents on the east of Neboah and Jogbehah, and smote the host, for the host was secure. And Zebah and Zalmunna fled, and he pursued after them, and he took the 2 kings of Midian, Zebah and Zalmunna, and discomfited all the host. And Gideon the son of Joash returned from the battle from the ascent of Heres. And he caught a young man of the men of Succoth, and inquired of him. And he wrote down for him the princes of Succoth, and the elders thereof, 77 men. And he came unto the men of Succoth, and said, Behold, Zebah and Zalmunna, concerning whom you did taunt me, saying, Are the hands of Zebah and Zalmunna now in your power, that we should give bread unto your men that are weary? And he took the elders of the city, and thorns of the wilderness, and briars, and with them he taught the men of Succoth. And he broke down the tower of Penuel, and slew the men of the city. Then said he unto Zebah and Zalmunna, Where are the men whom you slew at Tabor? And they answered, As you are, so were they, of one form with the children of a king. And he said, They were my brethren, the sons of my mother. As the Lord liveth, if you had saved them alive, I would not slay you. And he said unto Jether his firstborn, Up, and slay them. But the youth drew not his sword, for he feared, because he was yet a youth. Then Zebah and Zalmunna said, Rise you, and fall upon us, for as the man is, so is his strength. And Gideon arose, and slew Zebah and Zalmunna, and took the crescents that were on their camels' necks. Then the men of Israel said unto Gideon, Rule you over us, both you and your son's son also, for you have saved us out of the hand of the Midian. You have saved us out of the hand of Midian. And Gideon said unto them, I will not rule over you, neither shall my son rule over you, the Lord shall rule over you. And Gideon said unto them, I would make a request of you, that you would give me every man the earrings of his spoil, for they had golden earrings, because they were Ishmaelites. And they answered, We will willingly give them. And they spread a garment, and did cast therein every man the earrings of his spoil. And the weight of the golden earrings that he requested was 1,700 shekels of gold, besides the crescents, and the pendants, and the purple raiment that was on the kings of Midian, and beside the chains that were about their camels' necks. And Gideon made an ephod thereof, and put in his city, even in Ophrah, and all Israel went astray after it there. And it became a snare unto Gideon, and to his house. So Midian was subdued before the children of Israel, and they lifted up their heads no more. And the land had rest for 40 years in the days of Gideon. And Jerubbaal, the son of Joash, went and dwelt in his own house. And Gideon had 70 sons of his body begotten, for he had many wives. And his concubine that was in Shechem, she also bore him a son, and he called his name Abimelech. And Gideon the son of Joash died in a good old age, and he was buried in the sepulchre of Joash his father in Ophrah of the Abiezrites. And it came to pass, as soon as Gideon was dead, that the children of Israel again went astray after the Baalim, and made Baal-berith their god. And the children of Israel remembered not the Lord their God, who had delivered them out of the hand of all their enemies on every side. Neither showed they kindness to the house of Jerubbaal, namely Gideon, according to all the goodness which he had shown unto Israel. All right, let's go back up here to verse 1. And the men of Ephraim said unto him, Why have you served us this, that you didst not call us when you wentest to fight with Midian? And they did chide with him sharply. And we're going to find out Ephraim, remember when Gideon gathered everybody, he only gathered the tribes north of the borders of Ephraim, Manasseh and Asher and Naphtali and Zebulun. And he didn't include Ephraim. He didn't send messengers down that far to get Ephraim to battle. And now Ephraim's confronting him, wanting to know why you've done this great battle and conquered this Midian, and why didn't you include us into this? And they was pretty angry about it. Verse 2, and he said unto them, What have I now done in comparison with you? Is not the gleaning of Ephraim better than the vintage of Abiezer? And this is what he said was, ain't you picking up what I've left over better than all my pickings altogether? Because to glean the vine is to go back behind the pickers who would pick the harvest, whatever the harvest would be. They would be the pickers, and then the gleaners are those who would come behind, taking just what's left. But we'll find out that it was Ephraim who caught Oreb and Zeb, the two princes of Midian. Verse 3, God hath delivered into your hand the princes of Midian, Oreb and Zeb, and what was I able to do in comparison with you? Then their anger was abated toward him when he had said that. And that's what he told him. He said, Hey, you got the two princes, man. What was I able to do in comparison with you? And they was pretty happy about that, because and what it was is they wanted to boast a little bit to themselves and make everybody think that they had done a little something. Verse 4, and Gideon came to the Jordan, and passed over, he and the 300 men that were with him, faint, yet pursuing. And we'll find out it was Gideon and his 300 men that God had chose, that God had sent. These that had the truth and the true understanding of God, that these would come in the end, and with their warning, with their light held high, breaking down those other empty vessels. Verse 5, and he said unto the men of Succoth, Give, I pray you, loaves of bread unto the people that follow me, for they are faint, and I am pursuing after Zebah and Zalmunna, the kings of Midian. So here's Gideon, and he's got his little band of 300 men, his army, and they're tired. They've been fighting all through the night. They're hungry, and they've come to Succoth, and they've asked these men of Succoth, Give us some bread, give us a little water, something to eat, because we're chasing down the kings of Midian, these Zebah and Zalmunna. And Zebah means the sacrifice, and Zalmunna means the shadowing that withholds. So they're chasing these two kings of Midian down. Verse 6, and the princes of Succoth said, Are the hands of Zebah and Zalmunna now in your power, that we should give bread unto your army? So they answer him, say, We're not going to give you no bread and water. You've not whooped nobody yet. Zebah and Zalmunna, you're just chasing them. Are they now in your hands? Are you now their boss? Verse 7, because we have to remember now, Midian had been oppressing them for several years. Been about 7 years they've been oppressing them. And people were accustomed to this. Verse 7, and Gideon said, Therefore, when the Lord hath delivered Zebah and Zalmunna into your hand, my hand, then I will tear your flesh with the thorns of the wilderness and with the briars. So what Gideon's telling these men of Succoth, this place of refuge, these hiding places, that's what Succoth means. He's saying when God gives me Zebah and Zalmunna, then will I tear your flesh with these thorns of the wilderness and the briars. And we'll find out what this means just here in a little bit. Verse 8, and when he went up from there to Penuel, and spoke unto them in like manner, and the men of Penuel answered him just as the men of Succoth had answered him. So they said, we ain't going to give you no bread or no water. You ain't nobody's boss. Verse 9, and he spoke also unto the men of Penuel, saying, when I come back in peace, I will break down this tower. And Penuel means one who turns from God Almighty, one who turns from God Almighty. And this would be the place. They've erected a tower there, this Tower of Penuel. Verse 10, and Gideon saying, when I come back in peace, means when I've conquered this land, I'm going to tear down this tower that you've made here. Verse 10, now Zebah and Zalmunna were in Karkor, and their host with them, about 15,000 men, all that were left of all the host of the children of the east. For there fell 120,000 men that drew sword. And these 120,000 men would be the 120,000 men that's basically destroyed themselves, and plus those that the Gideon's men managed to get a hold of. And about 15,000 men remain, and they've come into this city of Karkor. And this city of Karkor means to dig in, like I'm digging a foundation. They've dug in here, even like they're digging a spring, a well. Gideon's chased them down to Karkor. And verse 11, and Gideon went up by the way of them that dwelt in tents on the east of Nabal and Jogbehah, and smote the host, for the host was secure. So this probably was where these two cities here, Nabal, and means to bark like a dog would bark, a warning, as a dog would bark in warning. And Jogbehah this means lifted up, this place, a lifted up place. And they went down there, and this is where the host of their army was set up, and was set up in a fortress, because they were secured there, they were set in. And Zebah and Zalmunna fled, and he pursued after them, and he took the two kings of Midian, Zebah and Zalmunna, and discomfited all the host. So Gideon went on down, and he dispersed their armies and whooped them. And discomfited here, he basically overcome all the host, all the armies. Verse 13, and Gideon the son of Joash returned from the battle from the ascent of Heres. And this ascent of Heres, of course Gideon, being the one that heweth, sent by God, Joash, returned from the battle of the ascent of Heres, or the going up to Heres. And we remember Heres. Heres is Timnath Heres, where they buried Joshua, where Joshua was buried. And it's backwards from what it said in Joshua, where it was Sarah, and Heres means scraping. And Timnath-Serah, if we remember, is this place where they would consider to scrape. So he's chased them to the going up of it. 14, and he caught a young man of the men of Succoth, and he's inquired of him, and he wrote down for him the princes of Succoth, and the elders thereof, 77 men. So on their way back, Gideon catches this young man. He's coming out of Succoth, and he makes him write down the names of all the leaders of Succoth, all the leaders of this hiding place, this place of refuges, this place of liars. 15, and he came unto the men of Succoth, and he said, behold, Zebah and Zalmunna, concerning whom you did taunt me, saying, are the hands of Zebah and Zalmunna now in your power, for that we should give bread unto the men that are weary? And we're going to find out this place of refuges in Succoth, if we remember from an earlier chapter, and where we talked about Mazor, these men that are hidden in this refuge, this place of refuge, and they're hiding there. that wouldn't come out and help God against the mighty. See, these are the same ones there. They ain't so much liars as they are just cowards. Won't come out and help God come against these because they're scared. And we'll see this young man writes down all the names of all the elders of Succoth. And Gideon comes to Succoth, and he's got Zalmunna and Zebah with him. This sacrifice, this shadow that withholds, these two that these once of Succoth out of the refuge said he couldn't take, said he couldn't whoop them, and they wouldn't give him no bread and water. They wouldn't give him no help along the way. So Gideon had to go down and battle the sacrifice and this shadow that withholds understanding. He had to battle it on his own. Him and the 300, these few that God had given him, these few that had drank straight from the water theirself. 16, and he took the elders of the city, and thorns of the wilderness, and briars. With them he taught the men of Succoth. And these thorns and these briars represents those who doesn't have any understanding. And Gideon took these thorns and these briars, and with them he taught the men of Succoth. He taught the men in these refuges where they was hiding, these hiding places that they've made. And what he did was basically was give them a good thrashing, like a father would give a son, and when he has greatly gone astray, in the manner that the men of Succoth had, that they would not come out and help fight against these mighty who are against God. 17, and he broke down the tower of Penuel and slew the men of that city. And we find that Gideon goes back and he tears down this tower, this high place that they'd made, these that turned from God, this tower of Penuel. And he tore it down, and he slayed the men of that city, because they had taken refuge in their tower. Verse 18, then he said unto Zebah and Zalmunna, where are the men whom you slew at Tabor? And they answered, as you are, so were they, of one form with the children of a king. And what he's basically saying, he says, who are these that you slew in Tabor? And they said, well, they were a people just like you. And Tabor means the breaking place. And he's asking the two kings of Midian, the two kings of those that contend with God, whom they were that he slew. And they said, well, they was just like you with this one king. In verse 19 he said, they were my brethren, the sons of my mother. As the Lord lives, if you had saved them alive, I would not slay you. And that's basically what he tells these men of Succoth. He says, if you would have saved these men of Tabor, I wouldn't kill you this day. But we'll find out they did not save. They delivered them up to death, even with their idols that they had built up in the land. 20, and he said unto Jether his firstborn, up and slay them. But the youth drew not his sword, for he feared, because he was yet a youth. He didn't have no understanding. And Jether means remnant. These few that were left, they didn't have enough understanding to slay these two kings, to slay this sacrifice and shadow that withholds. They didn't have the strength. He didn't have the strength. They were young, and they just didn't have the knowledge and the understanding, because this sword represents the word in the end time. And this youth here, this remnant that's left of those that come out with Gideon, these 300 that God has chosen. 21, and Zebah and Zalmunna said, rise you and fall upon us, for as the man is, so is his strength. And Gideon arose and slew Zebah and Zalmunna, and took the crescents that were on their camels' necks. And we'll find out this is what Gideon did. They said, Zebah and Zalmunna said, rise you and fall upon us, for as a man is, so is his strength. And basically what they was doing, they was insulting Gideon, and they said, don't tell a boy to do your job. Won't you rise up and do it yourself? And Gideon arose and slew Zebah and Zalmunna, and took the crescents that were on their camels' necks. And these camels would represent the creatures they would use to carry their burdens, and they hung these chains and these crescents around their necks. That way, on their long trains through the desert places, that people would recognize them from a distance of who they were. And these crescents are still the symbology of the same people today, and we're getting ready to find out who they were. Verse 22, Then the men of Israel said unto Gideon, Rule you over us, both you and your son's son also, for you have saved us out of the hand of Midian. So they, all the men of Israel now say to Gideon, Hey, come be our ruler and rule over us, your sons and your sons forever. They're going to make him the king. But Gideon says, 23, And Gideon said unto them, I will not rule over you, neither shall my son rule over you. The Lord shall rule over you. And this was one of the smartest things Gideon ever said in his life. He said that God shall rule over you, neither me nor my son. Basically, that no man's going to rule over Israel, but God shall rule over Israel. 24, And Gideon said unto them, I would make a request of you, that you would give me, every man, the earrings of his spoil, for they had golden earrings, because they were Ishmaelites. And these earrings were the spoil that the 300, these men of Israel, had took in their escapades against the children of Midian. They had been taken off the dead bodies, all the earrings and jewelry of gold and all the spoil, it would be called. And he's asked them to. He said, now, if I would make one request, since I've done this thing now, that you give me all these earrings. And we'll find that they were Ishmaelites. And Ishmael is the son of Abraham through Hagar, Sarah's handmaid. And Ishmael, Hagar was sent away, and Ishmael, God promised, he said, I will make of you a mighty nation. And we see here that God has made of Ishmael a mighty nation. And these crescents are the symbolism that's still used today to identify Ishmael. And I'll take a moment here to tell the story. It's off the subject, but we're going to take a moment here to talk about Ishmael and about a little story in the book of Jasher where Abraham goes down to see Ishmael. After many days he's sent away, and he comes to the tent of Ishmael, and there inside the tent he hears Ishmael's wife, and she is cursing the children, and she is talking very sharply to the children and abusing them. And he says there to her, Is Ishmael here? And she says, No, he's not. He's gone off hunting. And she says to her, and Abraham says to the wife of Ishmael, he says, Give me, I pray you, to drink. And she said, We have nothing here. So Abraham prepares to go back on his journey back home, and he tells this wife of Ishmael, he says, Give this message to Ishmael. He says, Tell him that the pin that you have in your tent opening, to cut it off and place there a new one. And this has significant understanding to those who are listening and who know what this means. And I ain't going to go into more detail on it. I just want to take a minute and tell that story. Verse 25, And they answered, these being the Israelites, that Gideon had asked for the earrings of these Ishmaelites. And they answered, We willingly give them. And they spread a garment, and did cast thereon every man the earrings of his spoil. So what they would do back then, and we would find this would be a custom, that they would throw out a sheet and throw the jewelry all in a pile into it and give it to the hero of the day, and this would be Gideon. And Gideon takes up this spoil. And verse 26, And the weight of the golden earrings that he requested was 1,700 shekels of gold, beside the crescents and the pendants and the purple raiment that was on the kings of Midian, and beside the chains that were about their camels' necks. So just in these earrings he had 1,700 shekels of gold. Quite a bit of gold, quite a bit of money. 27, And Gideon made an ephod thereof, and put it in his city, even in Ophrah. And all Israel went astray after it there. And it became a snare unto Gideon, and to his house. And we'll find out here that Gideon makes the mistake of his life here. And he made an ephod, and this ephod is basically a priestly garment. So he makes himself a priest unto God, and he places this place in Ophrah. And what this is he would build there his place to be a priest over the children of Israel. And it would become a snare to Gideon, and a snare to Gideon's house. And we'll find this out in the long run, that God would even use this against Gideon, and he has already used it against Israel, because we see that they have all went astray after it there. 28. So Gideon was subdued, or Midian was subdued before the children of Israel, and they lifted up their heads no more. And the land had rest for 40 years in the days of Gideon. So Gideon, the judge, ruled over Israel for 40 years, this period of probation. And Midian, those that contended with God, were subdued before the children of Israel. 29. And Jerubbaal, the son of Joash, went and dwelt in his own house. And Gideon, that's who Jerubbaal is, he's one who contended with Baal, went and dwelt in his own house. And Gideon had, verse 30, 70 sons of his body begotten, for he had many wives. So we're going to find out, see, Gideon has already took to himself many wives for his great wealth that he has, that he's made for himself, and he's probably using this ephod to gain even more riches to himself in this place that he is set up to do just that. 31. And his concubine that was in Shechem, she also bore him a son, and called his name Abimelech. And we're going to find out Abimelech is going to play a significant role in the story to come. Abimelech means my father is Melech, and Melech means king. And this Melech is one who will come in their future. This king, the father, his father is king, Melech, who would be a king god they would have in the future to come. And we will see this in the book in time to come. And Gideon, the son of Joash, died. And this one, the Huith, who was sent by God, died in a good old age, and was buried in his sepulchre of Joash, his father, in Ophrah of the Bezerites. And that's where they would bury Gideon, in his father's grave, in his father's tomb, there in his father's sepulchre, this dugout place. 33. And it came to pass, as soon as Gideon was dead, that the children of Israel went astray after Baalim, and made Baal-berith their god. And we're going to find out here, and we can see that as soon as Gideon is dead, just like the first chapters told us, this is what they would do. They would go be straight at the time of Gideon, except here we see that they went chasing after this ephod that Gideon had made, this little place that Gideon had made to go after, and they went astray after that. And it came to pass, as soon as Gideon was dead, the children went and made their Baalim. This Baalim, this Lord, Baal means Lord. Baalim is this image of a Lord that man has made. And they even made Baal-berith their god. And Baal-berith is the Lord of the covenant. Berith means the covenant, this agreement. And they made this God, Lord of their agreement. We'll find out this is what they do in the end. And it's not going to hold up. God will disannul their agreement, even this agreement they've made with death. And these, we'll find out, are the false teachings that men have tried to intermingle with God's word, only through the obedience of God's law do you have salvation. 34. And the children of Israel remembered not the Lord their God, who had delivered them out of the hand of all their enemies on every side. So they forgot about God again, and went chasing after their idols, these words of men. 35. Neither showed they kindness to the house of Jerubbaal, namely Gideon, according to all the goodness which he had shown unto Israel. And they didn't remember Gideon no more either, or this one that contended with Baal, this one who fought against idolatry. They didn't remember Gideon no more, but we remember, see, Gideon had went and erred. And I knew as soon as Gideon raised his name up besides the Lord, when he said to shout for the Lord and for Gideon, I knew there would be a mistake right there, because we don't put our name beside God. We don't put our name beside his word. We lift up the Lord in his light, in his torch. God delivered into the hand the enemy unto Gideon. Gideon didn't do nothing. He was obedient to the word of God, and he shouldn't have left it just like that. But he tried to make himself a seat and a name, and it become a downfall not only to him, but to many of the house of Israel, as it is this day. All right, we're going to move on. Let's go to chapter 9.